Whenever you buy something online, there's this massive, totally hidden legal machine working behind the scenes just to get it to your door. But what happens when that something isn't just a book, but, say, $1 billion shipment between two companies on opposite sides of the planet? Yeah. Okay, let's dive into the unseen rules that make all of global trade even possible.
So for this breakdown, we're leaning on some really fantastic materials from IGNO, also known as the People's University. They've done a great job unpacking the legal architecture that keeps all of our global commerce moving.
I mean, have you ever really thought about it? You've got different languages, different currencies, thousands of miles of ocean separating a buyer and a seller. It's kind of a modern miracle that anything gets done at all, right?
Okay, just picture this. A company in Germany is trying to buy supplies from a company in China. If something goes wrong, and things do go wrong, whose laws do they follow? Whose courts do they turn to? It's a recipe for absolute chaos.
Well, this is the story of how the world fixed that, how we went from total legal confusion to a unified system. It's the story of the single rulebook designed to bridge all those gaps, the borders, the languages, and the legal traditions.
All right, so first things first. Let's really get a handle on the sheer scale of this problem.
We love to talk about the global village, and it sounds so cozy, right? But in reality, it was a village where everybody was speaking a completely different legal language. And that, as you can imagine, created massive, massive barriers to trade.
And this just illustrates the core conflict perfectly. So take two major legal systems, right? You've got English law, which is all about predictability and certainty. Every single detail needs to be spelled out. Then you have German law, which is way more flexible. It relies on these big principles like good faith. And look, these aren't just tiny differences. We're talking about fundamentally different philosophies of what a contract is. Now, just try to imagine that level of complexity, but multiplied across hundreds of different countries.
So yeah, clearly this kind of legal chaos just couldn't last. As the global economy started to boom, it desperately needed a solution. And that kicked off this decades-long search for a single, unified rulebook that everyone could agree on.
And as you can see from this timeline, this journey, it was a long one. It actually started way back in 1930, but then, World War II happened and everything got put on hold. The effort got picked back up after the war, which led to a really important first step with the Hague Conventions in 1964. But the real breakthrough, that didn't happen until 1980, when the UN finally approved a new draft. And that's the one that officially went live in 1988.
And that breakthrough, it has a name. It's called the CIS-GS. And really, this is the star of our whole story.
Just look at this number for a second, 94. As of 2020, that's how many countries have adopted the CIS-IG. And we're not talking about small players here. These are nations that represent the vast majority of the global economy. So yeah, this isn't some niche, obscure agreement. This is, for all intents and purposes, the global standard.
Okay, so what is this thing exactly? Well, the CISG, which stands for the UN Convention on Contracts for the International Sale of Goods, it basically provides a neutral set of rules for business-to-business sales across borders. Super important point, it doesn't cover consumer goods, so it's not for, you buying a t-shirt online. But the most crucial part is this principle called party autonomy. I love this. Think of it like a buffet. It's not forced on anyone. Businesses can choose to use the whole thing, they can pick and choose the parts they like, or they can just ignore it completely. It's a tool, not a command.
But here's the thing. The CISG is just the foundation. You see, international trade is incredibly complex, so businesses need even more specialized tools to kind of build on top of that foundation.
And this is where a concept called soft law comes into play. Just think of it as widely accepted best practices or industry standards. These aren't treaties that governments sign. They're just rules and principles that are incredibly influential for one simple reason. They just work.
A perfect example of this comes from an organization called UniDrive. Their principles, honestly, they're like a greatest hits album of contract law from all over the world. It provides this wonderful, neutral framework that companies can use to fill in any gaps that the main rulebook, the CISG, might not cover.
And then you've got Incoterms. Okay, this is just pure genius. Instead of writing out pages and pages detailing shipping responsibilities, businesses can just use a simple three-letter code that everyone in global trade understands instantly. It's like a universal shorthand for logistics.
For example, right, if a contract says FOB, that stands for free on board. And both parties immediately know the exact moment, right when the goods are physically placed on the ship, that all the risk and responsibility transfers from the seller to the buyer. Boom. No confusion, no arguments, all sorted out with just 3 simple letters. So, okay, we have this really elegant system, right? A mix of hard law like the CISG and soft law like Incoterms. But how does it actually hold up when the world gets completely thrown into chaos?
Well, what's the ultimate stress test? A global pandemic. Supply chains just shatter, borders slam shut, workers get sick. So what happens to all those contracts when fulfilling them suddenly becomes basically impossible? To answer that, let's look at the CISG's built-in escape clause.
This right here, this is Article 79 of the CISG. It's the legal mechanism for what's often called force majeure, an act of God. And it basically says you might be excused from your obligations if something happens that is truly an impediment beyond your control.
But, and this is a huge but, it is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. To use this clause, a business has to meet a really strict four-part test. 1. Was the problem actually beyond your control? 2. Was it unforeseeable when you signed the contract? 3. Could you have reasonably avoided or overcome it? And 4. Was it the direct cause of your failure to perform? During the pandemic, courts and arbitrators all over the world use this exact framework to decide countless cases.
And really, that's the story here, isn't it? We went from a world of total legal chaos to this sophisticated, multi-layered, and honestly, surprisingly resilient system, a system that proved it could withstand even a once-in-a-century global crisis.
So this is a framework that was built over nearly a century of cooperation. But, as climate change, geopolitical shifts, and brand new technologies create even bigger challenges, the big question remains, can this remarkable legal machine continue to adapt? Can it keep the gears of global commerce turning for the next 100 years?